What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actors walks onto a morning talk show expecting a friendly chat about his latest project, only to be blindsided by a host who seems determined to tear him down on live television? It only took 45 seconds for George Stephanopoulos to turn what should have been a lighthearted interview into the most uncomfortable television moment of the year, and what followed was a clash so intense that it ended with Tom Holland walking off the set in front of millions of viewers. The morning started like any other at the Good Morning America studios in Times Square. Tom Holland arrived early, smiling and waving to fans gathered outside. He was there to promote his newest film, a project he had poured his heart into for over a year. The young actor, known for his genuine kindness and down-to-earth personality, sat down on the iconic curved couch, greeting the panel with his characteristic enthusiasm. George Stephanopoulos sat across from him, flanked by Robin Roberts and Michael Strawn. The energy in the studio felt off from the start, though Tom tried his best to ignore it. He chatted warmly with Robin about his flight in, laughed with Michael about a recent soccer match, and seemed ready for what he assumed would be a fun conversation. But George had other plans. "So, Tom," George began, his voice carrying an edge that immediately caught everyone off guard, "let's talk about your career trajectory. You've been playing the same character for what, 7, 8 years now? Don't you think it's time you proved you can actually act?" The studio went silent. Robin's smile faltered. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Tom blinked, clearly taken aback by the aggression in the question. "I'm sorry. What?" Tom asked, his British accent thickening slightly, as it always did when he was confused or upset. "It's a simple question," George continued, leaning back in his chair, with a smugness that was palpable even through the cameras. "You've built your entire career on one superhero role. Some might say you're a one-trick pony. How do you respond to critics who say you don't have the range to be taken seriously as an actor?" The question was delivered with such casual cruelty that even the camera operators exchanged glances. This was supposed to be a light morning interview, not an attack. Tom's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. "Well, George, I'd say that's a pretty reductive way to look at someone's body of work. I've done theater in the West End. I've done dramatic films that premiered at major festivals. I've worked with some incredible directors across multiple genres. To say my entire career is one role ignores years of work that came before and alongside it." George waved his hand dismissively, as if swatting away Tom's words like annoying insects. Sure. But let's be real here. When people think of Tom Holland, they don't think of any of that. They think of you in spandex. Everything else is just background noise, isn't it? Failed attempts to break free from the only thing you'll ever be known for." "Have you, though?" George interrupted, his tone dripping with condescension. "Or have you just been riding the coattails of a massive franchise? Let's be honest. Without that suit, would anyone even know your name? Would you even have a career? I mean, they could have cast anyone in that role. A trained monkey could have done what you did, really. Just follow the green screen, hit your marks, collect your paycheck." The insult was so blatant, so unnecessarily harsh, that several audience members audibly gasped. This wasn't interview banter. This was a personal attack. Tom's eyes widened in disbelief. "Did you really just compare me to a monkey on live television?" "It's a figure of speech," George replied with a shrug, though his smirk suggested he knew exactly how offensive his comment was. "Don't be so sensitive. I'm making a point about the nature of blockbuster filmmaking. Any competent actor could have filled those shoes." "You just happened to be there at the right time," Robin finally interjected, her voice tight with barely concealed frustration. "George, I think that's a bit unfair. Tom has demonstrated incredible range in his performances. I've seen his work on stage, his dramatic roles. This is completely uncalled for." "Oh, here we go," George muttered, rolling his eyes theatrically. "The Celebrity Defense Squad. Robin, With all due respect, you've been in this industry long enough to know the difference between real talent and manufactured stardom. Tom Holland is the latter. He's a product of marketing and franchise building, not genuine skill. Robin's professional smile had completely disappeared now. That's your opinion, George, and frankly, it's a pretty cynical and unfair one. Tom has worked incredibly hard to build his career, and dismissing all of that because of your personal bias is not journalism. It's just mean. I'm just asking the questions our viewers want answered, George shot back, not even looking at Robin. His eyes remained fixed on Tom with an intensity that felt more like an interrogation than an interview. Someone has to be willing to speak truth to power in this town, and if that makes me the bad guy, so be it. I can live with that. Tom took a deep breath, his hands clasped together on his lap. When he spoke, his voice was measured but firm. George, I came here today to talk about a film that means a great deal to me and the entire cast and crew who worked on it for 2 years. We poured our hearts into this project. If you've got some personal issue with me or my career, maybe we should address that directly instead of disguising it as journalism. Because what you're doing right now, this isn't an interview. This is you taking shots at me for reasons I genuinely don't understand. Did I do something to offend you? Did we meet before and I somehow wronged you? Because I'm sitting here trying to figure out what I did to deserve this level of hostility. The audience, which had been murmuring uncomfortably, fell completely silent. This was not the playful banter they had come to expect from morning television. George scoffed, actually scoffed on live television. Personal issue? Don't flatter yourself, Tom. I'm simply pointing out what everyone in the industry already knows, but is too polite or too afraid to say. Shy, you're a kid who got lucky with one role and has been desperately trying to prove yourself ever since. It's actually kind of sad to watch, if I'm being honest. All these attempts at serious acting, at being taken seriously, and yet, here you are, still defined by that one character, still unable to escape it. It must keep you up at night, doesn't it? Knowing that's all you'll ever really be? Michael Strawn's eyes went wide. He leaned forward, his muscular frame tense with barely controlled anger. Whoa, George, come on, man. That's crossing a line. That's way over the line. This is supposed to be a morning show, not a hit piece. What are you doing right now? Seriously, what is this? I'm not crossing anything, George snapped, his voice rising in volume and pitch. I'm tired of pretending that celebrity worship passes for real conversation on television. Tom Holland is sitting here, promoted as some great actor, when really he's just a brand. A carefully constructed product designed to sell movie tickets. And I think our audience deserves to hear the truth for once instead of the usual softball questions and fake enthusiasm. Tom's face had gone from shocked to genuinely hurt to something else entirely. His eyes hardened, his posture straightened, and when he spoke again, his voice was calm, but carried a steel edge that surprised everyone. The truth? Tom repeated slowly. You want to talk about truth, George? Let's talk about how you booked me for this interview 3 weeks ago. How your producers called my team, excited about the project, asking thoughtful questions about the themes we explore in the film. Let's talk about how I woke up at 4 a.m. to be here. How I've done nothing but speak respectfully to you and your colleagues. And how you've apparently decided to use this platform to work through whatever insecurity you're dealing with by trying to humiliate me on national television. The studio audience gasped. Robin put her hand to her mouth. Michael actually started to smile, though he quickly suppressed it. George's face turned red. Insecurity. I've been in this business for over 30 years. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, and actual actors with real credentials. I don't need some child who plays dress-up for a living to psychoanalyze me. Then stop acting like one, Tom fired back instantly. A child, I mean. Because right now, though you're the one throwing a tantrum because, what, I didn't give you the reaction you wanted, Because I didn't break down and cry when you came at me with these ridiculous questions. Robin tried again to intervene. Maybe we should take a quick break and... No! George cut her off sharply. No breaks. Tom wants to have this conversation, so let's have it. You talk about respect, but you show up here, to my show, expecting us to fawn all over you like every other outlet does. You're not special, Tom. You're not even particularly talented. You're just young and marketable. And the second you age out of that demographic, Hollywood will forget you ever existed. The cruelty in George's voice was shocking. This wasn't journalism, wasn't even confrontational interviewing. This was personal, vindictive, and completely uncalled for. Tom stood up slowly, carefully removing the microphone clipped to his jacket. You know what, George? I've sat through some tough interviews. I've been asked hard questions, challenging questions, fair questions. But this isn't journalism. This is just you being cruel, because you can be, because you have the platform and you think that gives you the right to treat people however you want. Sit down, George demanded, his voice sharp with authority. We're not done here. Actually, we are, Tom replied calmly, setting the microphone on the couch. I'm not going to sit here and let you berate me for your entertainment or anyone else's. I came here in good faith, and you've made it clear that was a mistake. Michael stood up as well, putting a hand on Tom's shoulder. Tom, you don't have to leave, man. George is out of line here. Don't touch him, George barked at Michael, rising from his own seat now. Don't encourage this diva behavior. This is exactly what I'm talking about. The second someone holds up a mirror, these people can't handle it. A mirror? Tom's voice rose for the first time, genuine anger breaking through his controlled demeanor. You haven't held up anything except your own ego, George. You came into this wanting a fight, and congratulations, you got one. But I'm not playing this game. I'm not giving you the satisfaction of breaking down so you can feel powerful. Robin stood now too, her professional composure cracking. George, this needs to stop. Right now. This is completely unprofessional. I'll decide what's professional on my own show, Robin, George snapped at her, his control clearly slipping. So, and if you and Michael want to coddle these entitled celebrities, that's your choice. But I'm not doing it anymore. I'm sick of it. Sick of pretending that people like Tom Holland are special just because they've memorized some lines and know how to hit their marks. People like me? Tom's voice was quiet now. Dangerously quiet. What exactly do you mean by that, George? Young actors who think the world owes them something, George responded, his face flushed with emotion. Who show up expecting praise and can't handle the slightest bit of criticism. You're all the same. Fragile. Overrated. Replaceable. The words hung in the air like a physical weight. The audience was completely silent now, watching what had become a full-scale meltdown on live television. Camera operators didn't know where to point their lenses. Producers were undoubtedly screaming into earpieces backstage. Tom took a step closer to George, his voice steady and clear. I feel sorry for you, George. I really do. Because somewhere along the way, you forgot that the people you interview are human beings. We're not just content for you to consume and spit out. We're not here for you to project your frustrations onto. And the fact that you can't see how inappropriate this entire exchange has been says more about you than it ever could about me. Get out, George said, his voice shaking with rage. Get out of my studio. Gladly, Tom replied, already turning toward the exit. But for the record, I'm not leaving because you told me to. I'm leaving because staying here would mean accepting that this kind of treatment is okay, and it's not. It's not okay for me. It's not okay for any guest you have on, and it's not okay for the people watching at home who deserve better than whatever this was supposed to be. Michael moved to walk with Tom, but Tom shook his head. Stay, Michael. You and Robin don't deserve the fallout from this. This is between me and George. Robin's eyes were glistening with tears. whether from frustration, anger, or sadness. It was hard to tell. Tom, I am so sorry. This should never have happened. It's not your fault, Robin, Tom said gently, giving her a small, sad smile. You've been nothing but kind. George, still standing, pointed toward the exit. This is what happens when you challenge them, people. This is the real Tom Holland. Can't handle the heat, so he runs away. Proves my point exactly. Tom paused at those words, turning back one final time. No, George. This is what happens when someone refuses to participate in their own humiliation. There's a difference between challenging questions and personal attacks, and if you can't see that distinction, then I genuinely hope someone you trust sits you down and explains it to you. Because this, Tom gestured around the studio, this isn't going to end well for you. Is that a threat? George demanded, taking a step forward. It's an observation, Tom replied calmly. People are watching, George. They're going to see this, and they're going to make their own judgments about who was out of line here. I'm comfortable with how I conducted myself. Are you? The question hung in the air, unanswered. George's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For the first time in the entire exchange, he seemed to realize the magnitude of what had just transpired. Tom didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked toward the studio exit with his head held high, his stride confident despite the chaos he was leaving behind. The audience began to murmur, some people actually standing and applauding as he passed, which only seemed to enrage George further. Sit down, George shouted at the audience members who were clapping. This isn't a show. Sit down. But they didn't sit. More people stood, the applause growing louder, a clear indication of where their sympathies lay. Robin had her face in her hands. Michael stood with his arms crossed, staring at George with an expression of complete disbelief. As Tom reached the studio doors, he could hear George still shouting behind him, his voice growing more frantic, more desperate. This is my show! My show! You can't just walk out. Get back here! But Tom kept walking, pushing through the heavy doors and into the backstage area, where shocked crew members stood frozen, unsure of what to do or say. Some reached out to pat his shoulder as he passed. Others simply stood in stunned silence. One of the producers, a woman in her 40s with a headset still around her neck, approached Tom with tears in her eyes. Tom, I am so sorry. That was completely unacceptable. We had no idea George was going to do that. Tom managed a tired smile. I believe you. It's okay. Well, it's not okay, but it's not your fault. Behind him, he could still hear the chaos from the studio. George's voice, shrill and angry. Robin trying to calm things down. Michael saying something in a low, firm voice that Tom couldn't quite make out. The audience still making noise, still reacting to what they had just witnessed. Tom found a quiet corner backstage and pulled out his phone, his hands shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was wearing off. He had dozens of messages already, even though the interview had only started 15 minutes ago. Word traveled fast in the age of social media. A security guard approached cautiously. Mr. Holland, can I get you anything? Water? A quiet room? Actually, Tom said, looking up with a weary expression, I think I'd just like to leave, if that's possible. Of course, sir. Let me escort you out the back way. Avoid any cameras. As Tom followed the security guard through the maze of hallways that made up the backstage of Good Morning America, he could hear the show continuing in the studio, though it sounded chaotic and disorganized. He wondered briefly what they were saying, how they were trying to explain what had just happened to the viewers at home. But mostly, he just felt exhausted and disappointed. He had genuinely been excited for this interview, had thought it would be a fun way to share his passion for his new project with people. Instead, it had turned into something ugly and personal, something he never could have anticipated. The security guard led him to a back exit where a car was already waiting, called by the same producer who had apologized earlier. As Tom slid into the back seat, he took one last look at the building, at the place where his morning had gone so spectacularly wrong. His phone buzzed with a call from his publicist. Tom declined it, not ready to talk about what had just happened. Not ready to analyze or strategize or plan next steps. Right now, he just needed a moment to process, to breathe, to remind himself that he had handled the situation with as much grace and dignity as anyone could have under those circumstances. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the studios, the chaos, and George Stephanopoulos still ranting in front of a live audience. Tom closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the seat, and allowed himself to feel the full weight of what had just occurred. In the studio, the show had descended into barely controlled pandemonium. George, rather than backing down or apologizing, had doubled down on his attacks, now ranting about celebrity culture and entitlement to an audience that was clearly not on his side. Robin had taken over hosting duties, Shush trying desperately to steer the conversation back to something resembling normal programming, but the damage was done. Michael had actually walked off the set as well, refusing to sit next to George for another second. "I can't do this, man," he had said, loud enough for the cameras to pick up. "This isn't what I signed up for. This isn't who we are." The show cut to an unscheduled commercial break, leaving producers scrambling to figure out how to salvage what remained of the broadcast. In the control room, executives were already on phones. Damage control mode activated before the interview had even fully ended. But Tom Holland was already gone, already miles away from the studio, processing an experience that no media training could have prepared him for. He had walked into that building as a guest, and expecting professionalism and courtesy, and had been forced to leave to protect his own dignity and self-respect. The interview that was supposed to promote his new film had instead become something else entirely. A moment that would be talked about, analyzed, and remembered not for anything related to his work, but for the shocking display of hostility from a host who had completely forgotten the basic principles of respect and decency that should govern any interview, any conversation, any human interaction. And through it all, Tom Holland had maintained his composure, spoken his truth, and walked away with his head held high. In a situation designed to make him look bad, he had somehow emerged as the clear voice of reason, while George Stephanopoulos had revealed something ugly about himself that no amount of experience or credentials could excuse. The city rushed by outside the car windows as Tom finally opened his eyes, looking out at the familiar streets of New York. His phone continued to buzz with messages, calls, notifications, everyone wanting to know what had happened, if he was okay, what he was going to do next. But for now, Tom had no answers. He had only questions. Questions about how someone could be so needlessly cruel. Questions about what had driven George to conduct himself in such an unprofessional manner. Questions about whether this kind of behavior was more common than he had realized, hidden behind the veneer of professional courtesy that usually characterized these interactions. One thing Tom knew for certain, though, was that he had no regrets about walking out. Standing up for himself, refusing to be diminished or humiliated for someone else's entertainment or ego, that was the right choice. The only choice, really, if he wanted to maintain any sense of self-respect. The car slowed in traffic, giving Tom a view of people on the sidewalks, going about their days, completely unaware of the drama that had just unfolded on live television. In a few hours, they would know. Everyone would know. The clips would be everywhere, dissected and discussed and debated. But right now, in this moment, Tom allowed himself to simply exist in the quiet of the car, away from the cameras and the confrontation and the chaos. He had survived an ambush disguised as an interview, where he had stood his ground against someone determined to tear him down, and he had walked away, which took more strength than staying ever could have. The morning had started with such promise, such hope. Tom had been excited, energized, ready to share his passion with the world. And George Stephanopoulos had taken that enthusiasm and weaponized it, turned it into an opportunity to inflict pain for reasons Tom still couldn't fully understand. But it was over now. The interview was over, the confrontation was over, and Tom was moving forward, literally and figuratively. The car merged onto a highway, putting more distance between him and the studio with every passing second. His phone buzzed again. This time, Tom looked at it. A text from Robin Roberts. Simple, heartfelt. "I am so sorry, Tom. You handled that with incredible grace. Yes, you deserve so much better." Tom typed back a quick response. "Thank you, Robin. Not your fault. Take care of yourself." Because that was the thing that George had missed entirely in his tirade. This wasn't about celebrity or ego or entitlement. It was about basic human decency. About treating people with respect, regardless of their profession or fame or age. About recognizing that behind every public figure is a real person with real feelings who deserves to be treated with dignity. George had failed that basic test spectacularly, and in doing so, he had revealed something about himself that no amount of backtracking or apologizing could undo. He had shown the world exactly who he was when he thought he had the power and the platform to get away with cruelty. The car continued on, carrying Tom away from the disaster of the morning and toward whatever came next. He didn't know what that would be yet. Didn't know how this would affect his film's promotion, his career, his relationship with the media. But he knew he could face it, whatever it was, because he had faced George Stephanopoulos at his worst and had come out the other side with his integrity intact. And really, when you stripped away all the noise and chaos and drama, that was what mattered most. Not the ratings or the headlines or the public opinion, but the knowledge that when confronted with an impossible situation, Tom Holland had chosen dignity over submission, truth over peacekeeping, and self-respect over people-pleasing. The 45 seconds it had taken for George to show his true colors had set in motion a chain of events that would reverberate far beyond that studio, far beyond that morning. But Tom had responded to those 45 seconds with courage, with grace, and with a refusal to accept mistreatment as the price of fame. As the car carried him toward whatever came next, Tom allowed himself a small moment of pride, not for walking out necessarily, but for knowing when to walk out, for recognizing that some battles aren't worth fighting, because they're not battles at all, just exercises in someone else's need to feel powerful at your expense. George Stephanopoulos had wanted a reaction, had wanted to break Tom Holland on live television. Instead, he had broken something else entirely. The illusion that experience and authority gave someone the right to abuse their position and mistreat their guests without consequence. And Tom Holland, the young actor who George had so confidently dismissed as talentless and replaceable, had taught the veteran host a lesson that no amount of years in the industry had apparently taught him. That respect is earned, not demanded. That cruelty is weakness, not strength. And that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to play along with someone else's games. The city continued to pass by outside the window, indifferent to the drama, indifferent to the chaos. And Tom sat in the quiet of the car, processing, reflecting, and preparing himself for whatever storm was about to break once the world fully absorbed what had just happened on Good Morning America. But he was ready for it, because if he could handle George Stephanopoulos at his absolute worst, he could handle anything.